Hello and welcome, my name is Shadow Retro and today we will be covering the new Warframe Koumei, talking about everything that she has going for her in her kit and leaving an honest review. And when I say honest, I mean honest. I'm not going to sit here and tell you she's an extremely powerful Warframe or that she's a broken Warframe if she's not. Likewise, I'm also not going to tell you that she's a bad Warframe, because she's not. She's not, by no means is she a bad Warframe, but she also isn't nearly as good as other options, and what makes her unique and fun to play around with is also kind of what holds her back. But I'll talk more about that after and as we go through her abilities. In this video I will be telling you how to get Koumei, what her abilities are, and also be explaining my build for her. So if you don't want to watch the whole video, there will be timestamps for everything down in the description below, so skip ahead to whatever part of the video interests you most. So starting off with how to get her. The way you get her is a new, I believe it's called Shrine Defense game mode, which you find in Cetus. You have to first talk to Saya, the person who stands next to Konzu, and she'll give you some nonsense and direct you to Koumei's Shrine. You'll then be able to activate this game mode from Koumei's Shrine in Cetus, or you'll also be able to access it from the star chart. And there is obviously a still path version and non-still path version of it. Basically, the way the game mode works is Infested will be coming up from the beach of Cetus trying to raid the town, and you will have to hold off the Infested's attacks and collect these items from one of two different locations and deliver them to Koumei's Shrine. Each time you collect one, there is a cooldown before it will come back, before you can pick it up again. And if there are infesteds within the area of where you picked up this item, that duration will be paused. So you have to basically kill the infested, get them away from this area, so it will spawn these items again, so you can give it to Koumei's Shrine. Once you've delivered 4 of them, it will ask you to kill a certain amount of infested, then it'll summon a boss. Then you'll get rid of the boss's first health bar. You'll have to do get 2 more items and give it to the shrine, and then you'll defeat the boss, and that's the mission. You get all of Koumei's parts, including her weapons, from the mission as possible rewards upon completion. But however, you will also get an item that you can then go up to Koumei's Shrine in Cetus, and you will be able to buy her weapons and parts with a pity system related to it. Since Koumei can be gotten very early on in the game, she has been considered and called a beginner frame by DE and the community at large, which I will talk about my thoughts on that after we get through abilities. But because of this, Koumei's build time is actually only 24 hours instead of the full 72 hours that other Warframes are, which makes her the only Warframe that this is true with, so she's very quick and easy to build, which is nice. Moving on to abilities. First of all, let me direct you to the graphical interface just above her energy bar. You will see 5 dice and you will see an icon showing currently my melee icon. The 5 dice relate to her actual abilities, so I'll talk about them before we get into that. The other icon is her passive. What her passive does is every 60 seconds it will randomly select one of your 3 weapons. That weapon will then apply random status effects for the duration of that 60 seconds. I believe this is a force proc. I went to test it in Simulacrum and it wasn't applying any status effects at all besides the normal status effects of the weapon, so I imagine it just doesn't work in Simulacrum, but I assume this would be a force proc on every hit of a random status effect. I'm unsure. The passive picks a random weapon. You have no control over it at all. Even if you don't equip a certain weapon, so for example, if you don't equip a secondary weapon, it can still select the secondary as the weapon it gives its buff to. So I attempted to get rid of my primary and secondary to make it always work on my melee. That didn't work. It still will go for primary and secondary. It is completely random, you have no control over it. Reason being is because Koumei's entire kit is based on randomness. She is the Gambler Warframe. Her abilities have an element of randomness to them, which makes them hard to mod for, because you can't mod for randomness. You want to mod for certainty. And when we're talking about certainty, Koumei's kit doesn't actually do that much. But thematically, Koumei is a very cool Warframe because of this randomness, and she can have different playstyles. Each time you play her, the way you play her can be different because of one of her abilities. So theme-wise, she's very, very cool, and fun factor, I would say she's potentially top tier. Obviously, fun is subjective, but I feel like a lot of people can really enjoy Koumei, so I definitely recommend picking her up. But in terms of actual power, she's nothing impressive. What the actual 5 dice roll do is simple. Each time you cast an ability, every single one of them, you will roll one of the dice, like so. The 5 die will roll, and in the middle of the 5 die, you will get the total number of what all 5 dice means. The abilities will then scale off the total result, and the abilities each have a specific additional effect that you get if you happen to roll 3 6s. So her abilities kind of scale off this randomness. They work in different ways, which again results in a bit less consistency with her kit. Her first ability is an ability I actually really like, and it is very good as well. You will send out a bull that will go forward, and in its trail will leave these strings everywhere. Enemies that get hit by these strings will be applied with a random status effect. This makes this ability extremely good for priming enemies, and that is actually what Koumei really shines with. So this ability I actually really like. I think it's a very cool ability. The damage the ability does is dependent on the dice roll. So it has a set amount of damage it does, and then it gets multiplied by your dice roll. If you happen to roll all 3 6s, the strings will apply 1 of every status effect. You can actually see when you look at the strings, they are different colors. The colors the strings are relates to what status effect they deal. If you were to get 3 6s, the strings would all be silver. Additionally, when you aim your weapon, the strings will disappear to make it a bit easier for you to see your enemies, but they are still there. Her second ability will give you a random challenge. For example, the one I just got is kill 13 enemies with headshots. Upon completing this challenge, you will get a random Deviri decree. If you get a low dice roll from your 5 die, you will also be getting a debuff while you have the challenge activated. The challenge will last forever, and you won't be able to recast the ability while the challenge is activated, but you can hold cast the ability to drop the challenge. So you won't get the decree, but the challenge will go away, and the debuff you had from the challenge will also go away. Once you do get a decree, there will be a cooldown before you can cast this ability again. And I believe the cooldown stacks the more decrees you have. And I think it caps out at 150 seconds. So at maximum, there will be a 150 second cooldown before you can cast the ability each time to get a new decree. This ability is very cool in theory, but very unpractical. The reason why I say that is because it gives you a random challenge, a challenge that you likely probably won't want to do, and it gives you a random decree. And there are a lot of decrees in the game, and most of them will likely be useless for what you're doing. The odds are of you actually getting a decree that will be useful for you is extremely low. So playing any mission that you're just going to run through and do quickly, this ability is basically worthless to you, and you may as well helmet it off, because the odds are you're not going to get a decree that's going to be useful to you. However, if you are an endurance runner, not necessarily level cap, but any form of long type of mission, this ability can be really fun to play around with, because you're going to be getting different decrees each time, and when you actually go for a long time in mission, it doesn't matter as much if you get random decrees, because you will eventually get some good decrees, and your decrees will always be different each time, which will change the way you play her. That means each time you do an endurance run will be different, at least a tiny bit, which is a very cool the best selling point of Koumei, honestly, because no other Warframe can do that. Every time you go into an endurance run with every other Warframe, you're going to get the same thing every time. But thanks to these decrees, you can go in, set up decrees, play the cards, see what you get, and your build will be different. It's like you're playing the circuit, which can have your build be different in different times you play the circuit, but for any mission. But if you're not doing a longer run, it is basically useless, because you just won't be able to stack up enough decrees to get some use out of it, because you're likely going to get a bad decree. Her third ability is essentially off-brand Mesmerskin. She will summon a bunch of tags around her. The number of tags she summons is dependent on your dice roll. Oh, actually, sorry, I forgot to mention, with her second ability, if you roll 3 6s, you will get the decree for free. You won't have to do the challenge, you will just get the free decree. Anyway, back to her third ability. So yes, you'll summon these tags around her, and the amount of tags you get are dependent on her dice roll. While the ability is activated, you will not be able to recast the ability. While these tags are around you, each time you take damage from an enemy, you have a 50% chance to instead get healed by the damage you should have taken, and you will also be given iframes. However, after this effect activates, there is a 3-second cooldown. So the reason why I say it's off-brand Mesmer Skin, because Mesmer Skin basically ignores damage each time you get shot and gives you iframes. This one has a 50% chance of healing you, giving you iframes with a 3-second cooldown. So again, off-brand Mesmer Skin. However, if you get really lucky and manage to roll 3 6s with this ability, you will be given full immunity for the entire duration of the ability. And the ability doesn't have a set duration, it's just up until however long the tags last. And if you get a lot of tags, which 3 6s will give you at least 18, well, actually at least 20, assuming your other 2 dice rolls are both 1, the ability will last for a very long time, meaning you will be immune to all damage for a very long time if you get all 3 6s. But it is rare because the ability does last for quite a while, so you actually have rolled the die for this ability not very often, so the chances are pretty low. Lastly, her 4th ability. Her 4th ability is another priming ability like her first. She will suspend enemies within a comb in front of her up on strings. Enemies in the strings will be applied with a number of status effects. How many status effects do they get applied with? The same number of what your dice roll is. As you can see with the enemies in front of me, they received 9 electric, 1 gas, and 2 blast, which equals up to 12 status effects. So what status effects is completely random. Something else I have noticed, however, is while enemies are suspended, the duration of these status effects are paused, which basically makes blast useless because I won't be able to do the blast, but it is very good for priming effects. If you manage to roll 3 6s, it will apply additional status effects, and it will turn the ability into a full 360, or at least it will hit enemies behind you as well. So, Koumei, what are my issues with her? What are the things I like about her? So I already kind of covered them briefly. First of all, I want to talk about the idea of her being a beginner Warframe. So if we look at her critically, the only thing her kit does is priming enemies and an off-brand Mesmer Skin. That's the only thing her kit does. Yes, you do get decrees from her second ability, but that is completely random and, as I said, basically pointless unless you're doing endurance runs. The thing about why it makes no sense to be calling her a beginner Warframe is because priming enemies, which is literally half of her kit, and the only thing she does besides, again, a tiny bit of survivability, which isn't that good, is not useful for a new player. The only reason why priming enemies is useful within this context is Condition Overload or Gun CO. All mods that a new player doesn't have access to. Yes, new players can get access to Condition Overload relatively early, but they're unlikely to know it even exists and won't go out of the way to farm it, and are unlikely for it to drop randomly because there's a somewhat low drop chance. Meanwhile, Gun CO mods won't even be able to be accessed until they can fully complete the star chart, which means they need to do Jade Shadow, Whispers in the Wall, Angels of Zeramin. All 3 quests need you to do New War, and New War has a bunch of prerequisites that you need to do. So a new player isn't going to be having access to the mods that makes her kit useful. So to a new player, she does nothing. Like literally, she does nothing because the only thing she does is prime enemies. I mean, she does have a healing effect that's inconsistent, so I guess a new player can use her for that. But you also have Warframes like Wukong, which has a consistent heal that new players can have access to very easily. So no, she's actually a terrible option for a new player. What she is amazing at is any late game endurance player because of the randomness of her second ability being able to change up the feel of your play. So the supposedly new beginner Warframe is actually only really best for a late game endurance run player, which is just odd to me, to say the least. If you're not if you're not an endurance player though, even in the middle game and into the late game, she definitely has something to offer you, assuming you have your Gun CO and Condition Overload mods. And she can be very fun to play. Like I said, she's not very powerful, but not every Warframe needs to be Saren or Octavia. Warframes can have their gimmicks and be fun to play and have interesting styles, and she has her gimmick. Unfortunately, her gimmick is what makes her kind of fall flat compared to other options, and objectively she is weaker than other options because of that. But that doesn't matter, she's still more than capable of ripping through enemies, and she can be very fun to play, and if you enjoy her, I definitely recommend playing her. And her kit is definitely unique and different, so I would recommend picking her up. I am a bit disappointed in Koumei, but she came after Jade and Dante, so I don't think you can really blame me for being a bit disappointed. I do think it was... I will say, however, she can rely on the fact for her defects because of her gimmick, which is an excuse. But even if you ignore that, her kit still doesn't do a lot. Like, even if ignoring the gimmick side of it, her kit really is just priming enemies. And compared to Jade and Dante, which both have very bloated kits that do so many different things, a Warframe that's dedicated to really just doing one thing is a bit disappointing, to say the least, as even the worst Warframes can still do multiple things. So I do wish there was more to her kit. Again, I'm not mad at the randomness of her kit, that's a fun gimmick to play around with, but I wish her abilities did more than simply just prime enemies. Anyway, so what is this build I am using for Koumei? Well, it's a simple weapon platform build using Condition Overload, which is really the only real thing you want to be using her for. You can use any weapon you want, any type of weapon you want. I simply just went for a melee weapon because of melee influence being a very powerful arcane. I chose the Polon Eden. I choose this weapon because I love Polons, they're my favorite melee weapon in the game, and Eden is one arguably the best, tied with Grendel Prime, though it's technically slightly worse than Grendel Prime, but arguably the best Polon in the game. She does have her own Polon, actually. One of her 2 signature weapons is a Polon, so you could pair her with that if you wanted to. But I personally, I don't have that weapon yet, and Eden is my love. I love Eden, so I just go with Eden. But yes, you could do any weapon you want. The playstyle of this ability is very simple. I do have Raw over her second ability because I'm not using her for endurance runs, and Raw will increase the damage of my weapon, and also it is a faction damage buff, so it will double dip with the status effects I apply. If you did have a Raw damage setup, I would recommend using Zato's Whisper over Raw because it is better for Raw damage. And then I just have my third ability activated at all times for the bit of survivability it offers me. Obviously have Raw activated at all times, and I periodically will cast her first ability and her fourth ability as needed. I like to make sure her first ability is always around, there are restraints, because the first ability will last for a bit, and then her fourth ability, which does have a 4-second cooldown, I'll cast on a big group of enemies, as it does give a good bit of crowd control and is very good for priming, even better than the first ability is. Before we look into the build, let's discuss Archon Shards. So I do have 2 casting speed Archon Shards on her. Her fourth ability has a very slow casting time. You basically need at least 1 Tower Forged Ember Shard or 2 unTower Forged Ember Shards for casting speed, otherwise she's not going to be fun to play. In the Aura slot, I just went for Steel Charger because she has a default Matter Ray polarity, but you can run whatever you want, there has no specific setup with this build. And for her survivability, I am running a health tank setup, using Arcane Blessing for the extra 1200 health at max stacks, Vital for that extra bit of health, and also Equilibrium, which will be using both energy economy and healing, as I'll get health from energy orbs as well. And we do get healing from her third ability as well. So that's kind of our main sources of healing, but I will also have a backup source of healing, which I'll talk about as well, as both Equilibrium doesn't give enough health and her third is a bit inconsistent, so we can't rely on them completely. She has very low shields, which has led a lot of people to shield gate with her. You could definitely do that and should work very well with the shield gate setup. However, I tend to avoid doing shield gate setups if I can, just because health tank or shield tank setups are more they're more chill. You don't have to think about what you're doing as much. So I went for a health tank setup with her, which can be done very easily as I've done it. I opted to mod her mostly for range with overextended, giving me 190 strat range. This is to increase the range of both her first ability and her fourth ability. But I did also want a good bit of duration, mostly for Raw and also her first ability, which is why we had Archon Continuity and Constitution. I am using Archon Continuity here is because although it is random, if one of the strings or her fourth ability apply Toxic, they will then also apply Corrosive, which is then just additional priming. So it really is a no-brainer to run Archon Continuity with this setup. I do then have Primed Flow, Archon Energize, and Equilibrium for some more energy economy. This setup I have here is a bit spammy as I cast her fourth and her first and her fourth quite often. So you definitely do want a good bit of energy economy. And then Constitution, I don't know if I mentioned that, for some extra ability duration along with continuity. And then finally Blind Range. I don't care that much about strength on this build, but I did want to have positive strength, mostly for Raw. So I just used Blind Rage to offset Overextended, which gave me 130 strength. For my weapon build, as I said, I am using the Eden, which is a very good Polon. And I'm just using a very, very standard melee influence build. So we have Condition Overload, obviously for base damage. We have Electricity, it is a viral electricity setup. Electricity is very good as it is a AoE, and is a lot better now that enemy armor is capped at 90%. Berserker Fury for that extra attack speed. Our viral, these mods are unranked for a reason. This is because we want to make sure we're doing more electricity damage than anything else, so we make sure that we have applying electricity more than anything else. You'll see we have 10% chance to apply electricity, which is a lot more than anything else. That is at our base status though, however, because we do obviously run Weeping Runes, which will give us 440% status chance at max combo, so you definitely will be applying statuses a lot more than that. Likewise, we have Blood Rush, which will be giving us 440% critical chance buff at max combo. And then we have Galvanized Steel. So Galvanized Steel is one of the 3 new melee Galvanized mods. We never used to have melee Galvanized mods before. They are Galvanized Steel, Galvanized Reflect, and Galvanized Elementalist. Originally, when I looked at Galvanized Steel, I thought it is a replacement for Sacrificial Steel or Blood Rush, as it gives crit chance, right? Mine is off rank. At max rank, it gives 120%, 110% crit chance, and 40 crit damage per stack on melee kill. However, as I thought, and 110% crit chance is a lot less than Blood Rush, as Blood Rush is 4 times that with 440, and Sacrificial Steel is even double that steel with 220% crit chance. And that made me kind of think the mod was a bit useless, but then I realized it's not a replacement for Sacrificial Steel or Blood Rush on builds. It's a replacement for Organ Shatter, because at max rank and on Forced Axe, it will give you a 120% crit damage buff, which is better than Organ Shatter's 90% crit damage buff. So if you were to run Blood Rush and Organ Shatter, you would have 440% status chance with a 90% crit damage buff. Now we have 550% status chance with a 120% crit damage buff with a max rank Steel Might. I don't have the endo right now to max rank it. Obviously I will at some point, but what I just said there was if it was max rank. So Galvanized Steel is a massive buff to any quick melee build as a replacement for Organ Shatter, as you will increase your crit chance and you will increase your crit damage. Very good, definitely 100% worth to pick up. It's probably going to be the Galvanized mod, it's probably going to be the one of the new 3 Galvanized mods you will use the most. For the companion, I am using the Panzer Vulpaphiler. This is because this is a health tank setup, and the Vulpapilers have this nice mod here that actually gives you a health gate. When you take lethal damage, assuming this your Vulpafiler has stored up enough extra health, it will heal you based on the amount of health it has stored, and it stores health by decaying dead bodies. And then it will down itself to basically stop you from dying, giving you that nice health tank. Additionally, the Panzer Vulpaphiler works very well with Arcane Blessing as well as Equilibrium, because Synth Deconstruct will make enemies drop extra health orbs whenever they get tagged, and Viral Quills will spread off multiple spores at enemies, meaning the Panzer Vulpaphiler will be able to tag a lot of enemies very quickly. Panzer Devolution simply just reduces its respawn time from 60 seconds to 30 seconds. We have Pack Leader, which will be healing it on each of our melee hits, giving it a max, and the heals will go into Overguard, giving it 1,200 Overguard, so that's our companion's main survivability. Tandem Bond will help us with our melee combo count build-up, as every time our Panzer Vulpaphiler hits an enemy, we will get 6 combo, which is very good as it helps us build up combo very quickly. Tenacious Bond, assuming as long as the companion's weapon has critical chance of 50% or over, will give us a final 1.2 critical damage multiplier. This means that it adds a flat 1.2 onto your critical damage after mods. So if your critical damage after mods is 5, this will make it 6.2. Blue Retriever will increase our loot and credit pickups, so obviously why wouldn't you use it? And then we have Link Vitality for survivability, and Fetch is a must-have mod. I am yet to farm up the companion new weapons for the new companion mods for the new companion weapons, so I don't have a proper build here yet. However, we do have Swipe, which will increase the amount of attacks our Panzer Vulpaphiler does for Tandem Bond, meaning we'll get a lot of combo from it. And we also have Bite, which will increase its crit chance to above 50% for Tenacious Bond. And then more will just increase the damage the companion does. I will make a proper build for my companions once I farm up the new mods, but I just haven't done that yet. Lastly, we have utility weapons. So, the weapon you're actually choosing doesn't matter as much. However, for your primary, run primary dexterity for the arcane, as it will increase your melee combo duration by 7.5 seconds. Likewise, for your secondary, run secondary dexterity, as it will further increase it by 7.5 seconds. This will take it from 5 seconds, which is what the default, to 20 seconds, which is a big buff for any quick attack melee build. Additionally, on your secondary, you should be running Amalgam Barrel Diffusion for the extra rolling speed, and probably the 2 Auger mods as well, as it will give you some additional survivability. And on your primary, you should have Amalgam Serration for the additional running speed, as the extra movability just makes the game feel a lot better. And for the focus skill, you 100% need to be running Neramon because of the Power Strike passive, which makes it so instead of losing your entire built-up combo counter when you run out of combo duration, you only lose 5, which is massive because 12 times combo is 220 hits, and if you didn't have this, you would lose 220 hits. Now you would just go from 220 to 215. So you definitely want Neramon for any quick attack melee build, and that is the focus skill we are using for this build. And also, make sure to run either Magnus Elevate or Magnus Repair on as one of your 2 operator arcanes. Elevate will give you 300 health with a 95% chance each time you transfer into your Warframe, so you can just spam it. And Repair will heal you your Warframe each second you're in your Void mode by, I think it's 25% of the max health. These both are simply just to heal. Hopefully you can rely enough on Equilibrium and also Koumei's third ability, so you won't have to rely on this too much. But these are just basically just in case your health bar does get low, you can just quickly use your operator to get your health bar back up to max to give you that extra healing. As I said, Equilibrium and Koumei's third ability aren't reliable enough completely to not have this, so I definitely do recommend still running this just on top of that. Anyway, that is all for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please tell me what you think of Koumei in the description down below. And check out some of my other videos. I have already done a Caliban rework video and also a Nova rework video. So they're both very fun now, very fun to play around with, and I recommend you check out those videos. And until next time, bye bye!